You're right. That works. Oh, well, sure, fine. You can over on the side here and have some chairs on that too. Okay. Moment. That's the line should go into some people that are viewing it. Yes. Oh. I see.
How do you do, Joyce? How do you say John and Linda? Friends?
Oh,
We're friends. Same- Members of the same church, and also we had informal get-togethers. So Tens and us would go out to a restaurant together and chat.
I'm his brother.
Oh,
I haven't seen her working.
but we don't, we just do the Penn and the Sons.
So, well, I found a lot of copies. I don't know if finished. Just something from the.
On the third. Two deceased and he had one living. Moses, Abraham, Papito. Mom named him that for us. DP. Yeah, so happy old birthday village. Right. Yeah. Oh. Maybe stress a few things. Yeah, so that would be a space for that picture. No, that is nice. Moses. Did I think it said he. Yeah. Yeah, grandma, mom and pop were probably, or not happy. No, they did, but apparently they were. I don't know if they haven't been to the house or took them outside. I remember Dad saying that whenever they took them somewhere by car, they would put them in the trunk. Yeah, I believe that's what he says. Yeah, yeah, and not to mention cars back then were like huge. So they had, but still, that's very not so kind way to transport those. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we got Moses when I was about 14, I think. Yeah, he was, I don't know, maybe 13, I'm not sure. It was either 84 or 85, so in that area. And he lived, after when I graduated ITT, 98. Yeah. He's a year old. So I think he was like 14. Unfortunately, I can remember so easily because we just had my graduation party. And they felt like they had $1,000 on the floor. But we don't know exactly how, but he ended up in the pool. And we thought, and he had been around that pool 1,000 times. So, we kind of speculate maybe he died and it was here. Yeah, something like that. Who knows? But they couldn't find him, so apparently I wasn't there at the time. I was already home. And Mom was just turning the light. There he was, floating in the pool. And then they waited a couple of years and they got Abraham. A year or 2 years. I seen something around 2000. I think because there was a gap, so he was at least a year. And they had him. I can't remember what. He looked about 15. So that's 2015. And guess what? Abraham did the same thing Moses did. He ended up in the book. Not the one in Kobe because he had sold the house, but the one in Florida. Yeah, he's very yeah. I don't know if they have the schnauzers bred the state clear water. No. Yeah. Because neither of those dogs ever tried to get in the pool, and they seem to be, delirious. Oh, that leads to a funny story. Moses. We were actually on that boat up in Michigan, and I had just gotten done walking Moses. I was trying to lift him up with my side, and I didn't quite get him on there. Poor dog. He went right into the water. And Well, I didn't. I think it's rude, but I said, help for salt. And problem was, that got on the field. But the problem was, the field was up high above the water line. And so he's trying to reach down far enough to get it, so you can get a hold of him. He's having trouble getting his arm down low enough. Huh?
They just called,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks. He was having trouble with it. But he eventually got the dog out. I don't think so. Yeah, well, we learned from our mistakes, so we got, like, he didn't try to grab him by the collar because he didn't want to choke him. So after that, they got one of those harnesses that, that now go around the neck, around the middle. Yeah. And I think we also, maybe at that time, also got a life jacket for the dogs. Yeah. Or maybe a life jacket came later. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, so anytime around the boat, like the dog in the harness. And when we had the life jacket, we put him. No, I don't think so. Yes, especially. Yeah, yes. Yeah, so yeah, so we had it wasn't life changing. We also had the handle. And that reminds me, when we were, after that went forward, when we needed to get the dogs in the boat, we picked them up like a suitcase. Yeah, literally. And a lot of times, Abraham probably pick him up and he's like yeah. But once you get them on the boat, they were perfectly home with it. They were wandering around the deck and yeah. Well, we yeah. I'm not sure if it was Moses or whatever. One of the dogs would be in that boat. There was breeze from the Philippines. We'd put them down in the lowest part, the footwell. And he tried to climb up to the high side. And then he'd say, no, just yeah, lean up against the vertical part. Like, no, yeah, you just get up the outlet. No, yeah, there's a lot of scratches.
I guess it's instinct. It just goes for higher.
Probably. Yeah.
It's much safer down there.
Yeah. But like especially in the boats that they had before, yeah, we run around the deck and
Really?
Birthday sprinkles.
hello. Yeah. Huh? No, he left. He went to do something. I'm not sure what, but I think he left the building. I'm not mistaken. I don't, probably not. Uh-huh.
How are you?
Hanging
Did we get to start the service here soon, or is he fine? Yeah, Jane's here. And then at the end, I'll just conclude and ask everybody to come on by and give a final goodbye so that you.
What about all these pictures and everything?
Yeah, talk to Danny about that. We'll get that in before.
Because I'd like to take some pictures, so.
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
And I took pictures of the flowers for you.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah. I have all that documented.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been very nice. Nicely done.
I'll let Shane know you can come on in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm all right.
I'm just looking.
Yeah, this is a loan from Don and Luke.
Lots of time.
Yeah. Sure. You'd be okay. Could have one on hand. Okay. Yeah. And the times I have earned my storage now. Okay, that's why I had to borrow this one. Yeah, it's a combination. Yeah. Which one? Yeah. Vaguely, yeah. That was the Eagle Creek one. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Shane Wybrew, and I get to help facilitate our service this morning. The Penn family and friends welcome you in a time of honoring Edward Penn Sr., Paul Edward Penn Sr. Thank you for coming today and bringing your memories of Paul with you. As a part of our time together today, we'll hear from Paul's nephew, Don Fisher, Susan's brother, David Webb, and along the way, remember some stories and attributes of why we loved and will remember Paul so fondly. Ironically, as one of the 23 million Americans born in the middle of the silent generation, Paul was far from silent. As a matter of fact, just the other day, we were thinking about those who may want to participate with a few words during the ceremony today, and got to thinking that Paul Sr. would have a lot he would want to say. Paul Sr. was a loving husband and father, a son, brother, uncle, friend and mentor, and believer in possibility. It's been said that Susan was the idea person, but Paul was the implementer. And oh, did he implement. He never stopped, and he had so many achievements. Paul began his naval service during college in an officer's training program in 1956. Graduating from Purdue in 1960, go Boilers. Also going on to get his MBA from Indiana. Serving on the USS New Jersey and traveling everywhere from Norway to Guantanamo Bay, he learned and participated in many maneuvers and excursions. He later had time aboard the USS Bluebird and the destroyer John W. Thompson DD-760, And while on the USS Bluebird, he skippered a minesweeper all over the East Coast, from Halifax, Nova Scotia to the Panama Canal, no doubt fueling his desire to be on the water. Paul was a problem solver, a strategic thinker, and driven and ambitious. Paul received an honorable discharge from the Navy in 1963. And at this point in our service, we're going to hear from Don Fisher, Paul's nephew, and David Webb, Susan's brother. So Don, why don't you go ahead and come on up, and then David, you can come when Don is finished.
Good morning, everybody. I probably won't be quite as smooth as Shane was, but I'll try. We were joking on the way here that this will be the last time Paul has to wait for Susan to get. And I joked with her, so she semi-approved that. So Paul and Susan were married when I was really young, and right away he started influencing us and was essentially a life coach before any of us thought of somebody being a life coach. And he gave me somebody to emulate. I looked for people to emulate my career and education and so forth. He inspired me to become an engineer. And he was a consummate storyteller, as we all know. One of the things he helped me to do was learn how to sail. It's kind of a lost art. Almost nobody knows how to do that anymore. But when I was a little kid, apparently my mom told me that I promised my Aunt Susan I would buy her a sailboat because she always wanted one. Thankfully, Paul came along and saved me from having to do that. Sometimes, when we would have family gatherings, he would, between him and my Uncle Dave, we always played chess. Kind of odd thing for a family gathering, but he was always easier to beat than Dave because he was always distracted thinking about other things. But I didn't win very often. Let's see. Some of his stories he would tell us were not necessarily factual, and Susan and Paul Jr. called those his shaggy dog stories. When I was really young, I was riding a car with him on a busy street in Indianapolis, and he was hitting all the green lights. And he said, "You know how I do that?" And I said, "No, I have no idea." He goes, I'm an electrical engineer. I have this button under my dash. I push that, and it turns the light green. And he goes, "Let me show you." And of course, he just had it timed. We were pulling up, and he just reached down and pretend like he hit a button, light would turn green. I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." So when I say he inspired me to become an engineer, but only a year ago, he talked to me about how difficult it is to study engineering. I asked him why he didn't tell me that when I was 17 years old. He said, "I didn't think I would do it." He was an influencer before it was easy to be an influencer, before the internet. He did it the hard way, by talking to people. He loved to talk to people. He loved to advise people, give them help, tell them how to do things, how they can improve on doing things. He always said, "If I can see it, I can fix it." And he would rather fix something or come up with his own better way to do it than to buy something if he could save, if he figured out how to do it half the cost. And he did that frequently. I I asked some of his employees from Dark last night, what if they had some stories. And one of them said he had a couple of stories. One of them was Paul told him when they were trying to buy the house in Florida, they couldn't. They kept running up against houses would sell before they could actually get the offer in. And on the house they actually bought, there were actually two offers for more than asking price. Paul told the owner, I'll offer you the asking price, and I will promise you I will not tear your house down. And that's what got him the house. They actually accepted the lower offer. The other one was in the discussion of the employee, sorry, I can't remember his name, he put together some testing of one of Paul's inventions, and it wasn't coming up with the results Paul wanted. And so they were out on the factory floor discussing it, which turned into a little bit louder discussion, and a little bit louder discussion, and a little bit of an argument. The guy had only been there a few years. He was pretty young at the time, he said. And it became almost a shouting match, toe-to-toe shouting match. And then Paul said, well, I need to talk with somebody somebody else about that. And then, so the guy talked to his boss, and the boss said, boy, that's a quick way to get yourself fired. And he goes, oh boy, I can't afford to lose this job. So later in the day, he went into Paul's office, up to the front office, and asked if he could speak to him in private. And he says, I don't want to lose this job. And Paul said, what do you mean lose this job? He said, I just, I'm really concerned that somebody told me that, by confronting you like that, I was on a short list of getting out of here. And Paul said, look, I didn't hire you to be a yes man. I already have some of those. I hired you to go through the stuff with me and be factual. And so from then on, that gave them a better relationship and a higher aspiration. One story Paul told us after he came back from Florida this time that he had never told us before was that when he was in the Navy, they told him that they did obviously a lot of analysis of their officers and so forth, that when he got through with some stage of his work, that they wanted to give him an opportunity to get into the astronaut program because of his good vision and his IQ, his intelligence, and his way of thinking. And he told them, no, thank you, because as part of my testing, I did one of those test flights where they let the new guys take a hold of the thing. And he said, I almost crashed your jet, and I don't want to crash a rocket. So he bowed out of that. One time I always didn't understand what he did, as a kid. And one time he let me down because we had little electric slot car racers. And I came up with this grand scheme that I would have my uncle, the electrical engineer, modify my car so it'd be faster than everybody else's. And so I had it all worked out. He came over, and I said, hey, this is what I want you to do. And I'm showing him the car, and he says, no, I can't do that. I'm like, wait, what? Of course you can do that. You're an electrical engineer. He goes, well, it's just not a kind of system that can be upgraded easily like that unless you just completely replace it. So I was really crushed by that scheme that nobody would know why I was able to do better than them. One funny bit of advice he gave me in high school, because I went sailing with him and Susan and Paul Jr. several times, was, I didn't follow this advice, was go ahead and finish college, then hang out in the marinas in Florida, and then get jobs sailing on other people's boats around the world. So that way you can see things and meet other people. And you got plenty of time to get married and have kids. You can wait till you're like 35 or so. Of course, I had too many student debts and went ahead and started working right away. Later, we actually got to meet somebody that Pat McElwain that actually lived that life, and that was pretty fascinating. He was a captain for their around the world sail. So when Paul was sick and on the bed, we kept telling him, tell us stories. He kept wanting to tell us stuff that needed to be done. Here's how I got this. This is where I got this stuff. And we said, tell us stories. And this is going to be hard to say, but we figured he ran out of stories. And so he decided it was time to go on, move on. So thank you, everybody.
Well, I've spent almost half a century as a teacher, and many teachers have this disease that I've got. It's called run at the mouth. And so I will try very hard to not let that disease manifest itself here when I talk briefly about Paul. He was described as an avid sailor. Well, my background is sailing. I've been sailing for 40 years. And, but by contrast to my experience, Paul's been sailing probably 70 years. He's got 100 times more experience and 100 times better sailor than I would ever hope to be. His house on Copley Drive had a family room with a top shelf spanning the length of the room with sailing regatta trophies all across there. And I could just sit there and just amazingly admire those trophies. He was far more than just an avid sailor. He was a sailor's sailor. And I had the privilege of asking him to crew my sailboat, my 30-foot sailboat from Holland, Michigan, down to New Buffalo, Michigan. It's about a 50, 60-mile sail. It takes 2 days to do that. So he said, yeah, he would, and I was very, very thrilled and thankful that he agreed to do that. So we sailed from Holland, spent the night at South Haven, woke up the next morning with a very strong west wind blowing directly toward land. And there were serious waves on the lake. We were in a harbor, so we didn't have the waves, but we did have some spray coming across. It was quite a significant situation. So what do? We had a choice of three things. Either don't do anything or try to clear the harbor and sail. Well, we decided to clear the harbor and sail, but there were only two ways to do it. There was the better way and a lesser than better way. One not really right or wrong. It was just the better way versus the not so better way. And Paul turned to me, this man who's had a world of experience, more sailing than I had, and he said, Dave, what do you want to do? Oh, gee, yes. I mean, what he was doing was showing respect to me because it was my boat and I was captain. He was a crewmate, and I was supposed to make a decision that he would otherwise make. And I knew he probably had a clear idea what he would do, but he was asking me. So I dug into my experience. I had a lot of experience sailing. And I chose what I consider to be the better way. And we took that better way. And we did clear the harbor, and we made it safely safely down to New Buffalo. The point is, he had enough respect in me as a sailor to let me make a decision. And I thought that was really, really neat. So years later, this was like 20 years ago, years later, just a few years ago, I asked Paul, do you remember that time that we did this trip down to New Buffalo? He says, yeah. And I said, you remember that time we were challenged on how to get out of this harbor? Yeah. And I said, what if I'd taken that lesser decision? Would you have overridden my decision, or would you have gone with it? He said, I would have gone with it. And because again, it was the respect thing that he had for me as a sailor myself. And so this is why. You see, I'm an avid sailor. He was a sailor's sailor. And my respect for him was greatly, greatly improved above what I already had for him because of that incident. So I thought that was really neat. Wasn't a dramatic thing. There was no risk of loss of life. Would have risked some of the damage to the boat and made us look really bad as we were blown against the shore. But he was going to go with whatever decision I made. I thought that was really, really great for this sailor's sailor.
Paul was a successful entrepreneur, a visionary leader, disciplined and focused, and a deal maker. Paul founded Dark Controls, Inc. in December of 1963. He said they were always out of money in the early days, but fear of failure was never in his vocabulary. Paul trusted people to do what they said they would do. He was a good delegator. Even just a few days ago, I was on the receiving end of a little delegation myself. It was just last week, and he called me in to the porch where he was in his bed. And he said, Shane, I need you to talk to Susan. And the dog needs flea and tick treatment. And I know exactly where it is. And I'll tell you where it is. And then I'd like you to work with Susan and do that. And I'm thinking, it's late December. I think there are a few more important pressing details than Pepe's flea and tick treatment. And it wasn't 5 minutes later, Susan had run an errand to the pharmacy. She comes back, and then I get in trouble. So Susan walks in to speak to Paul, and I know he said, did Shane talk with you? And then I get summoned to the sun porch, and he said, did you talk to Susan yet with what I told you to do? And I said, she just got back. She just got here. She was gone. So then he goes over where the flea and tick treatment is, what bag it's in, where exactly it is. And so we walked through it, and Pepe's safe now, late December, no fleas and ticks around for the next 6 months. Over the years, Paul authored 7 patents, and the designs of several of those products are still being used today in industry. His business thrived because he preferred handshakes over contracts. He was honest and trusting. The Indiana Manufacturers Association even awarded Paul with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his manufacturing excellence in 2019. We've heard already that Paul Penn was an avid sailor, a passionate skier, outdoor enthusiast, and adventure seeker. I talked with Eddie the other day, who works with Paul and Susan down in Florida, and he commented about Paul being a true friend and a seaman above all regard. He said that that Paul had no fear, and that he's sure as he continues to work on boats on the water that he'll see Paul on the water every day. He and Susan sailed around the world. How many people can say that? Paul and Susan were active members of 3 different communities here in Indianapolis, Aspen, Colorado, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Many memberships and notable participations in symphony organizations in each of those cities. One specific, Futures for Children organization serving in Arizona and New Mexico, which Paul was very excited to help mentor and encourage a young student from the Zuni tribe from 2nd grade all the way through high school. He embraced life. Paul was intelligent, a master storyteller. Randy Ives, who takes care of Paul and Susan's boat down in Florida, even remembered a time while he was driving Paul and Susan back to the airport in Florida to fly home to Indianapolis. Paul was still in the middle of one of his stories when they get to the airport. And Randy says, I don't know, Paul, maybe I'll have to buy a ticket so that I can hear the rest of this story. His stories never ended. I have no doubt that each of you here will have just the right memory to hang on to. Memories that will serve as opportunities for us to laugh, think deeply about a subject, or just reflect on a life lived with purpose and intention. Paul would want to encourage you today. And as an encourager of others, he would say, I'm just telling you this to help you be better. Well, look around. We are blessed and better to have known Paul Edward Penn. At this point, I'll invite Susan, and she'd like to come say a few words before then I finish in closing.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank you all for coming. We all believe these words that were just being said, wholly from beginning to end. It was true. I would say the most thing that drove Paul in his whole life was being honest. That was the first thing that he wanted. And he trusted other people. He always said, I'll trust you until you do something wrong, or you break my trust. So I thought that was pretty cool, because in this day and age, trust is not always such a big thing. But thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Susan. At this point, our service will conclude, and I will invite John Leppert to the front to give us some instructions on what will happen next. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Shane. Yes, this concludes the service here at the mortuary. The family will be going to the cemetery. So at this time, if anybody would like to come by and pay a final respect, you may do so. If not, you're welcome to go home. But if anybody would like to come by, we'd like to start in the back and have you come by, and you can make your exit this way so that Paul and Susan can have a final moment before we go to the cemetery. So thank you. If anybody in the back would like to start, please.
Is there any way to get a picture of this wonderful group?
Yeah, certainly. Can we do that right now?
Yeah, please, before they start filing up.
Sure. Can I take a picture of everybody real quick?
It's kind of hard.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Let's take a few here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if anybody would like to come on by, let's start in the back, please.
Yeah, I can say very complicated, right? Containers.
It's true.
Stay tonight, go to